My name is Olivia and I am 34 years old. Right now, I am standing in the small kitchen of my own bakery flour dusted on my apron, the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread filling the air. But 3 years ago, I was the wife of a man who owned $1 million empire. He told me I was not worthy of his elite circle. He said I embarrassed him. Then everything he built came crashing down, and he came crawling back to the woman he threw away. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below and tell me your city. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I still remember the exact moment I met Derek. I was 26 years old working as an elementary school teacher at a public school in Columbus, Ohio. Teaching was my passion. I loved watching children discover new things, seeing their eyes light up when they finally understood a math problem or finished reading their first book. My salary was modest, my apartment was small, but I was content with my life. That particular afternoon in October, the sky opened up without warning. Rain poured down so heavily that I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. I'd forgotten my umbrella at school and my car was parked 4 blocks away. So I ducked into a small coffee shop on the corner of Main Street, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and handwritten menus on chalkboards. I ordered a cup of hot chocolate and found a seat by the window watching the rain stream down the glass. The shop was nearly empty, just me and an elderly couple sharing a slice of pie. Then the door swung open and a man walked in. He was wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, his dark hair slightly wet from the rain. He looked completely out of place in that humble little coffee shop, like a character from a different movie who had wandered onto the wrong set. He patted his pockets, pulled out his phone, and I watched his expression shift from annoyance to frustration. His phone was dead. He approached the counter and asked if they had a charger, but the barista shook her head apologetically. That is when he turned and noticed me sitting there. "Excuse me," he said, walking toward my table. "I am so sorry to bother you, but my phone just died, and I have an urgent call I need to make. Would you mind if I borrowed yours for just a minute?" There was something in his eyes, a mix of desperation and charm, that made me hand over my phone without hesitation. He thanked me profusely, stepped aside to make his call, and when he returned, he sat down across from me as if we were old friends. "I owe you one," he said with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I am Derek, by the way." "Olivia," I replied, "and you do not owe me anything. It was just a phone call." But Derek insisted. He told me he was the CEO of a real estate development company, that the call I had helped him make had saved a deal worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He wanted to take me to dinner as a thank you. I laughed and said that was not necessary, but he persisted with a playful stubbornness that was hard to resist. "At least let me buy your hot chocolate," he said. I agreed to that, and somehow that 1 cup of hot chocolate turned into 2 hours of conversation. We talked about everything and nothing. He asked about my students, genuinely curious about their progress and challenges. He told me about the pressure of running a company, how everyone expected him to have all the answers all the time. For those 2 hours, he was not a wealthy CEO, and I was not a school teacher. We were just 2 people who had found shelter from the same storm. When the rain finally stopped, Derek walked me to my car. Before I could say goodbye, he asked for my phone number. Not to repay a favor this time, he said, but because he wanted to see me again. I gave it to him, never expecting him to actually call. But he did, the very next day. What followed was the most romantic period of my life. Derek pursued me with an intensity I had never experienced before. Roses arrived at my school every Friday, always with a handwritten note. He texted me good morning every day and called me every night before bed. He told me I was a breath of fresh air in his suffocating world, that being with me made him feel like himself again. I was hesitant at first. The gap between our worlds seemed too wide to bridge. He drove a car that cost more than I would make in 5 years. His watch was worth more than everything in my apartment combined. But Derek brushed aside my concerns with ease. "I do not care about any of that," he told me one evening as we walked through a park near my apartment. "I have money, Olivia. I have success. but I have never had someone who looks at me the way you do. Someone who sees me, not my bank account. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. When I expressed discomfort about going to fancy restaurants, Derek took me to diners and food trucks instead. When I told him I loved old movies, he rented out a small theater just for us. He adapted to my world instead of forcing me into his. Or at least, that is what it seemed like at the time. After 18 months of dating, Derek proposed. We were back at that same coffee shop where we had met, sitting at the same table by the window. He got down on one knee and opened a small velvet box containing a diamond ring that sparkled under the dim lights. "Olivia," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "you have shown me what it means to be truly happy. Will you marry me?" I said yes. How could I not? I was in love with a man who made me feel seen and valued. I believed our love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Our wedding was nothing like I had imagined. Derek's family took over the planning, insisting on a lavish ceremony at an exclusive resort. 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. A 12-tier cake. A dress that cost more than my annual salary. I felt like a stranger at my own wedding, smiling for photographers and shaking hands with people whose names I forgot as soon as I heard them. My grandmother Ruth came, of course. She was 78 years old, the woman who had raised me after my parents passed away when I was 12. She wore a simple blue dress and sat quietly at a table in the corner, watching everything with knowing eyes. At one point during the reception, she pulled me aside and held both my hands in hers. Her skin was soft and wrinkled, her grip surprisingly strong. "Olivia," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "This world he lives in, it is very different from ours. I want you to promise me something. No matter what happens, no matter how things change, always remember who you are. Never forget your roots." "I promise, Grandma," I said, hugging her tightly. But even as I said the words, I was already being swept away by the current of my new life, too dazzled by the lights to notice the darkness creeping in at the edges. I noticed Derek's mother, Caroline, watching me throughout the reception. She was a striking woman in her mid-60s, elegant and cold, with silver hair styled perfectly and diamonds dripping from her ears and neck. She'd been polite to me in the months leading up to the wedding, but there was always something distant in her eyes, something that made me feel like I was being evaluated rather than welcomed. After the ceremony, she approached me with a champagne glass in her hand and a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the family, dear," she said. "I do hope you will be able to adjust to our way of life." I thanked her, choosing to interpret her words as genuine well wishes. But later that night, as Derek and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I overheard her talking to one of her friends. "She seems sweet enough," Caroline said, her voice carrying across the empty hallway. "But let us be honest, she is hardly what I had in mind for Derek. A school teacher from Ohio, I had hoped he would marry someone more suitable." I froze, my heart sinking. But then Derek appeared beside me, taking my hand, and I pushed the words out of my mind. I told myself it did not matter what Caroline thought. Derek loved me. That was enough. How wrong I was. After the honeymoon, I moved into Derek's mansion in an exclusive suburb outside the city. The house was enormous with 6 bedrooms, a home theater, a swimming pool, and gardens maintained by a team of landscapers. It was beautiful, but it never felt like home. Derek asked me to quit my teaching job. He said his wife did not need to work, that I should enjoy the freedom to do whatever I wanted. Part of me resisted, but he was so persuasive, so insistent that this was for the best. "Think of all the things you could do," he said. "Travel, take art classes, volunteer. You would not be tied down to a classroom anymore." So I resigned from the job I loved. I told myself I could always go back to teaching later. I told myself this was an opportunity to explore new possibilities. But weeks turned into months, and those possibilities never materialized into anything meaningful. Derek left for work before sunrise and rarely returned before 10 at night. On weekends, there were charity events, business dinners, golf outings with investors. I saw him for maybe a few hours each week, usually when he was too exhausted to have a real conversation. I filled my days as best I could. I redecorated rooms that did not need redecorating. I learned to cook elaborate meals that I ended up eating alone. I wandered through that enormous house like a ghost, surrounded by expensive furniture and empty rooms. The housekeepers and gardeners were kind, but they were not friends. They worked for Derek. They called me ma'am and kept a professional distance. I had never felt so lonely in my life. Then came the first party. It was a birthday celebration for one of Derek's business partners held at a rooftop restaurant in the city. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a dress I thought was elegant, doing my makeup and hair with extra care. When Derek came home to pick me up, I felt confident for the first time in weeks. But the moment we walked into that party, I knew something was wrong. The women there were wearing designer gowns that probably cost more than my car. Their jewelry was not just expensive, it was museum-worthy. They carried themselves with a casual confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege, and they all looked at me like they knew I did not belong. Derek's mother appeared at our side almost immediately. She looked me up and down, her expression carefully neutral. "Darling," she said to Derek in a low voice but loud enough for me to hear, "perhaps we should take Olivia shopping sometime. Help her find something more appropriate for these events." My face burned with humiliation. Derek said nothing. He did not defend me or tell his mother she was being rude. He simply nodded and led me away. During the party, I tried my best to mingle. I approached a group of women who were discussing their children's private schools. When I mentioned that I used to be a teacher, they exchanged glances. "Oh, how noble," one of them said with a condescending smile. "And what do you do now?" I hesitated. "I am taking some time for myself," I said. "How lovely," another woman replied. "So you lunch?" They laughed politely and then turned back to their conversation, effectively dismissing me. I spent the rest of the evening standing at Derek's side like a silent accessory, smiling when he smiled, laughing when he laughed, contributing nothing. On the drive home, I waited for Derek to say something, to apologize for his mother's comment, to acknowledge how uncomfortable I had been, but he drove in silence, his jaw tight. "Is something wrong?" I finally asked. Derek sighed. "Nothing. I am just tired." I knew he was not telling the truth, but I was too afraid to push, too desperate to maintain the peace, so I let it go. I let so many things go in those early months. After that party, Derek began making suggestions about my appearance. He said them gently at first, framing them as gifts rather than criticisms. "I hired a stylist for you," he announced one morning over breakfast. "Her name is Pamela. She is going to help you build a wardrobe more suited to our social obligations." I was taken aback. I did not ask for a stylist. I know he said, reaching across the table to pat my hand, but trust me, it will make things easier. These events can be overwhelming. Having the right clothes will help you feel more confident. So Pamela arrived with racks of clothing and a critical eye. She assessed my body like a sculptor examining a block of marble-pinching fabric and clicking her tongue. Over the following weeks, my closet was completely transformed. Out went my comfortable dresses and colorful cardigans. In came structured suits, designer gowns, and shoes so high I could barely walk in them. Then came the hair. Derek suggested I change my style something more sophisticated. I went from my natural waves to a sleek, polished look that required an hour of styling each morning. Then the makeup. A professional came to the house to teach me the right techniques. Contouring and highlighting and all sorts of things I had never bothered with before. Slowly, piece by piece, I was being reshaped into someone else. Someone I did not recognize when I looked in the mirror. I tried to stay connected to my old life. I asked Derek if we could visit my grandmother in Ohio for a weekend. He said he had meetings. I suggested inviting some of my college friends over for dinner. He said it was not a good time. Maybe next month, he always said. But next month never came. One evening, feeling desperately isolated, I called my best friend Margot. We'd been friends since college, and she had become a successful lawyer in the years since graduation. She was sharp and honest and had always been protective of me. "I miss you." I told her, curled up on the couch in one of the many empty rooms. "I miss you too," she said. "How are things?" "Really?" I hesitated. "Things are fine. Derek is just really busy. We do not get much time together." There was a pause on the line. "Olivia, you do not sound fine. You sound exhausted." "I am okay," I insisted. "Really. It is just an adjustment period. Once things settle down, everything will be better." Margot did not argue, but I could hear the worry in her silence. She knew me too well to believe my reassurances, but I was not ready to admit even to my closest friend that I had made a terrible mistake. 4 months into our marriage, Caroline invited the entire family for a Sunday dinner at her estate. It was a command performance, not a request. Derek told me we had to attend, that skipping would cause unnecessary drama. I decided to bring something homemade. In my old life, bringing food to a gathering was a sign of respect, a way of contributing to the community. I spent all Saturday afternoon baking my grandmother's apple pie, the recipe passed down through 4 generations. The crust was golden brown, the filling perfectly spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg. I wrapped it carefully and felt a small glow of pride as we drove to Caroline's mansion. When we arrived, the dining room was already full. Preston, Derek's younger brother, was there with his girlfriend of the month, a vapid socialite whose name I immediately forgot. Various cousins and aunts filled the other seats, all dressed impeccably, all speaking in that clipped, careful way of the wealthy. Caroline greeted Derek with a kiss on the cheek and gave me a brief nod. When I presented the pie, she looked at it as if I had handed her a dead animal. "Oh," she said, her lip curling slightly. "How quaint. It looks like something from a county fair." Preston snorted. "Did you make that yourself?" "How adorable." His girlfriend covered her mouth to hide her giggle. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment. I looked to Derek, waiting for him to say something, anything in my defense, but he was already walking toward the bar, his back to me, as if he had not heard a word. Dinner was an exercise in humiliation. Caroline spent the entire meal making pointed comparisons to other families, specifically to the accomplished daughters-in-law of her friends. "Did you hear about the Harrington boy?" she said, sipping her wine. "He married a surgeon. She just received a prestigious award for her research. Such a credit to their family." Everyone at the table murmured their approval. I stared at my plate, pushing food around with my fork. And the Wessler girl, Caroline, continued. A partner at her law firm by 32. Her mother must be so proud. Derek nodded along as if this were normal dinner conversation. Preston smirked at me from across the table. His girlfriend whispered something in his ear, and they both laughed. By the time dessert was served, not my pie, but an elaborate French pastry brought in by a caterer, I felt about 2 inches tall. My grandmother's apple pie sat untouched on the sideboard like an unwanted guest at the party. On the drive home, I could not hold back anymore. "Did you hear what your mother said about my pie?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She compared it to something from a county fair, like it was garbage." Derek sighed heavily. "She was just being honest, Olivia." "She was being cruel," I shot back. "And you did not say a single word. What was I supposed to say?" He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You brought homemade pie to a formal family dinner. Of course it looked out of place." I stared at him in disbelief. "So this is my fault, I am not saying that," he replied. "I am just saying you need to be more aware of these situations. This is not your grandmother's kitchen. Different rules apply." I turned away and stared out the window at the passing lights. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I wiped them away before Derek could see. When we got home, I went straight to the bathroom and cried until my eyes were swollen and red. Derek never came to check on me. He was already asleep by the time I crawled into bed, putting as much distance between us as the king-sized mattress allowed. The humiliation at the family dinner was just the beginning. A few weeks later, Derek informed me that he was the primary sponsor for the city's annual charity gala, one of the most prestigious social events of the year. He needed me there, looking perfect, playing the role of devoted wife. I prepared obsessively. I bought a new gown, had my hair professionally styled, practiced conversation topics, so I would not be caught off guard. I memorized names and faces from the guest list Derek's assistant had provided. I was determined to prove that I could fit into this world. The gala was held at a historic ballroom with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Hundreds of guests in tuxedos and evening gowns filled the space champagne, flowing freely, laughter echoing off the high ceilings. I walked in on Derek's arm feeling cautiously optimistic. For the first hour, things went smoothly. I smiled, shook hands, made small talk about the weather and the beautiful venue. Then a woman approached me, someone Derek introduced as a prominent businesswoman and potential investor. "So you are Derek's wife," she said, looking me over appraisingly. "What line of work are you in?" I took a breath. I used to be a teacher. Now I am focusing on other pursuits. "I see," she said, her smile tightening. "And what are your thoughts on the current economic indicators? I assume you keep up with these things being married to a real estate mogul." I panicked. I had not prepared for economic questions. I tried to say something intelligent, cobbling together fragments of news I had heard on television. "Well, I think the market is adjusting," I stammered. "Interest rates and consumer confidence and supply chains." The woman raised an eyebrow. Her smile became openly patronizing. "How fascinating," she said flatly. "If you will excuse me." She walked away without another word. I stood there mortified, watching her join a group of other guests and whisper something that made them all glance in my direction. Seconds later, Derek appeared at my side. His face was red. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. "What did you say to her?" he hissed, gripping my elbow hard enough to hurt. "Nothing," I said. "She asked about the economy and I—" He cut me off. "Do not speak about things you do not understand. Do you know who that was? She is considering investing $20 million in my new project, and you probably just talked her out of it." I tried to apologize, but Derek was not listening. "Just stay by my side and smile," he ordered. "That is all I need from you tonight. Can you manage that I spent the rest of the gala as a silent ornament?" I smiled until my face ached. I laughed at jokes I did not understand. I nodded along to conversations that had nothing to do with me. Inside, I was screaming. That night marked a turning point. Derek had made it clear exactly what my role was in his world. I was not a partner. I was not an equal. I was a prop, and a defective one at that. A week after the gala disaster, Derek came home late and drunk. It was past midnight when I heard his car in the driveway. He stumbled through the front door, loosening his tie, his movements sloppy and uncoordinated. I had been waiting up for him, unable to sleep with all the tension between us. I met him in the living room, still in my robe. "We need to talk," I said. Derek collapsed onto the sofa and laughed bitterly. "Talk about what?" "About us. About what is happening to our marriage." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. There was contempt there, barely concealed. "You want to know what is happening," he said, his words slurring slightly. "I will tell you. I have been trying, Olivia. God knows I have been trying to make you fit in, but you just cannot." "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I mean, you do not belong in my world. You never did. My mother saw it from the beginning. I just did not want to believe her. My heart felt like it was being crushed. Your mother." "She told me not to marry you," Derek continued. "She said you would be a liability, and she was right. Every event, every dinner, every party, you embarrass me. You say the wrong things. You wear the wrong clothes. You do not know how to talk to important people." I could not believe what I was hearing. This was the man who had told me I was a breath of fresh air, who had said he loved me because I was different from everyone else in his world. "Derek," I tried to interject, but he was not finished. "Do you know what my colleagues say about you? They call you the charity case. They wonder why I married so far beneath my status. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is for me?" I felt tears streaming down my face. "Is that really how you see me, as beneath you?" Derek sighed heavily, rubbing his face with his hands. "I thought you would change. I thought I could help you become someone better." But I was wrong. You are just a school teacher from a small town. That is all you will ever be. The words hit me like physical blows. I could barely breathe. Do you still love me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Derek did not answer immediately. That silence was worse than anything he could have said. Love is not enough, he finally replied. I need a partner who can help me in society, not a burden. Then what am I to you? He looked away, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. I do not know anymore. He stood up and walked past me toward the stairs. He climbed up to the bedroom and shut the door behind him, leaving me alone in the dark living room with my shattered heart. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the sofa until dawn, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I had missed. Had he always felt this way? Had his love ever been real? Or had I been fooling myself from the very beginning? After Derek's drunken confession, something shifted in our marriage. We barely spoke. He came home late every night and left early every morning. On weekends, he found excuses to be elsewhere. We slept in the same bed but might as well have been in different continents. And then came his 38th birthday. Derek decided to celebrate at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. He planned every detail himself, or rather his assistant did. 200 guests, all hand-picked. A private room with a view of the skyline. The finest champagne and a menu designed by a celebrity chef. I spent weeks preparing. I bought a new dress, had my makeup professionally done, even took deportment lessons to ensure my posture and movements were flawless. I bought him a gift, too. A vintage watch I had saved up for by selling some of my own jewelry, the pieces I had brought with me from my old life. It was elegant and timeless, and I had it engraved with a simple message on the back. For all our tomorrows. When I arrived at the restaurant, I expected to take my place beside Derek at the main table. Instead, his assistant intercepted me at the entrance. "Mrs. Harmon," she said, consulting her tablet, "you are at table 7. "Table 7? I echoed, confused. She smiled apologetically. There was a last-minute seating adjustment. "Let me show you to your seat." Table 7 was near the kitchen entrance, as far from the main table as possible. I was seated with people I did not recognize, spouses of junior employees who seemed just as confused as I was. From my distant vantage point, I watched the main table. Derek sat at the center, flanked by Caroline on one side and a group of investors on the other. He was laughing, accepting gifts, completely in his element. He had not even come to greet me. Caroline gave a toast. She spoke about Derek's achievements, his brilliance, his destined success. She mentioned his father, who had passed away years ago. She mentioned Preston and his contributions to the family. She mentioned every person at the main table by name. She did not mention me once. The word wife never crossed her lips. It was as if I did not exist. Later in the evening, when I saw a gap in the crowd around Derek, I approached with my gift. The wrapped watch felt heavy in my hands. "Happy birthday," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek took the gift without looking at me. "Thanks," he said dismissively and handed it to his assistant, who carried it away with all the others. He did not open it. He did not even acknowledge me beyond that single word. A man beside Derek noticed me standing there awkwardly. "And who might this be?" he asked with a polite smile. Derek glanced at me as if noticing me for the first time. "Oh," he said, she is family, not his wife. Family, like a distant cousin or an obligatory relative." I felt the ground shift beneath me. I muttered something about needing fresh air and fled to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and cried until my makeup ran down my face in black rivers. After that birthday party, I knew our marriage was dying, but I did not know just how deep the rot went until 2 months later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Derek was supposed to be at a conference in another city. I was home alone, wandering through the house with nothing to do, when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He had left it behind, which was unusual. I should not have looked. I know that. But something compelled me to pick it up. The message on the screen was from someone named Natasha. It included a photo, an intimate one, and a text that left nothing to the imagination. "I cannot wait to see you tonight, baby. This conference has been so boring without you." My hands trembled as I scrolled through the message thread. There were hundreds of texts going back months. Photos, love notes, plans for secret meetings. He had been taking her on trips, buying her jewelry, promising her a future. I felt physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left in my stomach. When Derek came home 2 days later, I was waiting for him. I had not slept. I had not eaten. I had spent 48 hours reading every message, looking at every photo, piecing together the full scope of his betrayal. "I know about Natasha," I said the moment he walked through the door. Derek froze. His expression flickered through several emotions before settling on cold indifference. "So what he said?" "So what?" I repeated, incredulous. "You have been cheating on me for months. You have been lying to me. You have been—" He held up a hand. "Olivia, let us not make this dramatic." "Dramatic? You have a mistress." Derek set down his briefcase and loosened his tie. "Natasha understands my world. She knows how to navigate social situations. She does not embarrass me." I felt like I had been slapped. "And what about our marriage? Our vows?" He shrugged. "We can discuss divorce when I am ready. For now, I need things to stay stable. There are big deals coming up. A separation would look bad. So I am supposed to just stay here. Pretend nothing is happening." "That is exactly what I expect," he said. "You have a comfortable life, Olivia, a beautiful home, financial security. Do not throw it all away over pride." Pride. This is about betrayal. This is about respect. Derek walked past me toward the stairs. "Get some sleep. You look terrible." And just like that, he dismissed me, like I was nothing more than an inconvenient employee. 1 week after I discovered the affair, Derek announced that he would be taking Natasha to the company's annual gala. Not me, his mistress. I found out when I overheard him on the phone, laughing with someone about how Natasha would look stunning in the dress he had bought her. I confronted him that night. "You cannot be serious," I said. "You are taking her to a public event where everyone knows you are married to me." Derek sighed as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Olivia, nobody will think anything of it. These events are about connections, not sentimentality. What about me?" He looked at me then, and his eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "You are not worthy of being in my elite circle," he said slowly, deliberately, as if explaining something to someone very stupid. "You do not know how to dress or speak or behave. You embarrass me every single time. So no, you will not be coming. You will stay home where you cannot cause any damage." The words landed like knife blades in my chest. Each one pierced deeper than the last. "Derek," I begged, "please. We can work on this. I can change. I can—" He shook his head. "No, you cannot. That is what you do not understand. You cannot change who you are at your core. And who you are is not good enough for my world." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "I will be home late. Do not wait up." The door slammed behind him, and I was alone with the wreckage of everything I had believed in. That night, I cried until there were no tears left. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a constant expression of defeat. Then I remembered something my grandmother had told me on my wedding day. Always remember who you are. Never forget your roots. I had forgotten. Somewhere along the way, trying to become what Derek wanted, I had lost myself completely. It was time to find her again. The next morning, I did something I should have done months ago. I called Margot. She answered on the second ring. "Olivia, are you okay? It has been weeks since I heard from you." "No," I admitted. "I am not okay, but I am ready to be." I told her everything. The humiliation, the isolation, the affair, the cruelty. I did not hold back or minimize or make excuses for Derek. For the first time, I let someone see the full truth of what my marriage had become. Margot listened in silence. When I finished, she let out a long breath. "I'm going to kill him," she said flatly. Despite everything, I laughed. "Please do not. I need you out of prison." "Then tell me what you need," she said. "Anything. I will make it happen. I need to get out. I need a divorce. And I need to remember how to be myself again." "Done," she said. "I am a lawyer. Remember? Let us get you free." Over the next week, Margot and I made plans. She found me a small apartment across town, nothing fancy but clean and safe. She began preparing divorce papers. She helped me understand my rights under the law. And then came the day I left. I packed a single suitcase with the things that truly belonged to me, not the designer clothes or the expensive jewelry Derek had bought. Those stayed in the closet. I took my old clothes, the ones I had hidden in the back. I took photos of my family. I took my grandmother's handwritten recipe cards, yellowed and stained with years of use. And I took back my dignity. Derek was not home when I left. He was at work or with Natasha or wherever he spent his time. I did not care anymore. I placed a note on the kitchen counter. "I have spent the last 2 years trying to become the woman you wanted. But I am done erasing myself for you. I am leaving and I will not be coming back. I do not want your money or your houses or your world. I only want my freedom. Goodbye, Derek." I walked out the front door of that mansion and I did not look back. Not once. Margot was waiting in her car at the end of the driveway. She opened the passenger door and I climbed in. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. More ready than I have ever been. She drove me to my new apartment. It was small, just a studio with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. After the sprawling mansion, it should have felt like a downgrade. Instead, it felt like coming home. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. The following week, I took a bus to Ohio to visit my grandmother, Ruth. She lived in the same small house where she had raised me, a modest 2-story with a garden out back and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she did not ask any questions. She just opened her arms. "Oh, my sweet girl," she said, holding me tight. "You have come home." I stayed with her for 2 weeks. We baked together every day just like we had when I was a child. Apple pies and cinnamon rolls and sugar cookies cut into shapes. She did not press me for details about what had happened. She simply gave me space to heal. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she told me a story I had never heard before. "Did I ever tell you about when I was young?" she asked. "When I married your grandfather, I shook my head. His family was wealthy," she said. "Not as wealthy as your Derek, but comfortable. And they looked down on me something terrible. Told him he was making a mistake. Told me I was not good enough. What did you do?" She smiled. "I proved them wrong. Not by changing who I was, but by showing them who I was. I worked hard. I built a good life. And eventually they saw that my worth had nothing to do with where I came from." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Your worth is not determined by what other people think of you, Olivia. It comes from inside, from the choices you make and the person you become. Do not let that man's words define you." "I will not, Grandma. Not anymore." Before I left, she pressed her recipe cards into my hands. "These have been in our family for generations," she said. "Maybe it is time to share them with the world." As I rode the bus back to the city, an idea began to form in my mind. A crazy, impossible, wonderful idea. What if I opened a bakery? When I returned to the city, I threw myself into making my dream a reality. I had very little money saved, but I had determination. And I had Margot. She believed in my idea from the moment I told her. More than that, she offered to lend me the money to get started. Not a lot, but enough to rent a small stall at the local farmer's market. "Pay me back when you can," she said, "which will be soon because your pies are incredible." I started small. A folding table, a hand-painted sign, and a display of baked goods made with my grandmother's recipes. That first Saturday, I was terrified. What if no one came? What if everyone walked past without a second glance? For the first hour, my fears seemed justified. A few people stopped to look but moved on without buying. I sold exactly 2 muffins and 1 slice of pie. Then a woman approached. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. She bought a whole apple pie and tasted a piece right there at the stall. Her eyes widened. "Oh my goodness," she said. "This is incredible. Where did you learn to bake like this?" "My grandmother," I replied. "Family recipes." "Well, you have a gift." She took out her phone. "I am going to tell all my friends about this." She was true to her word. The next week, I had a line at my stall. The week after that, the line was longer. People came specifically for my grandmother's apple pie. They asked about other flavors, other desserts. I added cinnamon rolls, butter cookies, pecan tarts. Everything sold out. Word spread. Local food bloggers started writing about the new vendor at the farmer's market with the amazing homemade pies. A small newspaper did a feature on me titled, "From Heartbreak to Baking One Woman's Journey." 3 months after I started, I was making enough money to support myself. Not luxuriously, but comfortably. I moved into a slightly larger apartment. I bought proper baking equipment. I started thinking about the next step. That next step came in the form of a man named Theo. He found me at the farmer's market on a rainy Saturday morning. Most vendors had packed up early due to the weather, but I had stayed unwilling to waste the goods I had baked. He was the only customer who braved the rain. "I will take one of everything," he said, surveying my display. I laughed. "Are you serious, completely?" He pulled out his wallet. "I own a chain of restaurants in the city. My head chef told me I had to try your apple pie." He was not wrong. As I boxed up his order, he handed me a business card. "My name is Theo. When you are ready to expand, give me a call. I would love to carry your products in my restaurants." I stared at the card in disbelief. This was beyond anything I had imagined. "Are you serious?" I asked again. He smiled. "I never joke about pastry. Your baking is exceptional. Call me when you are ready." Meanwhile, Margot had been working on my divorce. Derek initially refused to sign the papers. He thought I would come crawling back, that I would realize I could not survive without his money. He was wrong. When he finally understood that I was not returning, he signed. Perhaps he was too distracted by his business to fight. Perhaps he simply did not care. Either way, the divorce was finalized 6 months after I left. I was free. The day the divorce was official, Margot and I celebrated with champagne in my small apartment. She raised her glass. To Olivia, she said, "who walked through fire and came out stronger." I clinked my glass against hers. To new beginnings. And those new beginnings were just starting. I called Theo. We met for coffee and discussed possibilities. He wanted to feature my pies and pastries in all 5 of his restaurants. He would pay me a monthly fee plus a percentage of sales. It was more money than I had ever made in my life. But more than that, it was validation. Someone saw value in what I created. Someone believed in me. I signed the contract. My grandmother's recipes were going to be served in some of the finest restaurants in the city. Over the following months, I worked harder than I had ever worked before. I rented a commercial kitchen. I hired 2 assistants. I perfected my recipes and developed new ones. The demand kept growing. And then, about a year after I left Derek, I heard the news. Margot called me one evening, her voice tinged with a satisfaction that was unmistakable. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. "No, why? Turn on the business channel. You are going to want to see this." I grabbed my remote and flipped to the channel she mentioned. The headline on the screen made my jaw drop. "Real estate mogul Derek Harmon's empire collapses. Bankruptcy, filing imminent." The reporter explained that Derek's company had overextended itself on several high-risk developments. The market had shifted. Investors had pulled out. Banks were calling in loans. The empire he had built was crumbling. I watched in silence as they showed footage of Derek leaving his office surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked gaunt, exhausted, nothing like the confident man I had married. "How do you feel?" Margot asked. I thought about it. I expected to feel vindicated, happy even. but all I felt was a sort of sad emptiness. "I feel sorry for him," I admitted. "You are a better person than me," Margot said. "I feel like throwing a party." I laughed softly. "Maybe we can do both." As the weeks passed, more details emerged. Derek's company declared bankruptcy. The mansion was seized by creditors. His luxury cars were repossessed. Caroline lost most of her fortune because she had invested heavily in her son's ventures. And Natasha. She disappeared the moment the money ran out. No more designer dresses, no more fancy dinners, no more future together. She vanished like smoke. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Derek was living in a small apartment, now trying to rebuild from nothing. Preston had cut ties, unwilling to be associated with failure. Caroline had retreated to a modest house in another state, humiliated and bitter. The elite circle that Derek had prized so highly had abandoned him completely. When he had nothing to offer, they had no use for him. I thought about reaching out. Some small part of me remembered the man I had fallen in love with, the one who had seemed so genuine in that coffee shop, but I knew better now. That man had been an illusion, or perhaps a mask that Derek himself did not know he was wearing. I stayed silent. I focused on my own life, my own growth, and I kept baking. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I opened my own bakery. It was a small storefront in a charming neighborhood with a brick exterior and a hand-painted sign that read, "Olivia's." The grand opening was modest. Margot was there, of course, a few loyal customers from the farmer's market, some of Theo's staff. My grandmother Ruth made the trip from Ohio, her face beaming with pride. "I cannot believe it," she said, looking around at the display cases filled with pies and pastries. "My recipes in a real bakery." "Our recipes," I corrected, hugging her. "This is because of you, Grandma." "No, honey, this is because of you. You had the courage to start over. That is something not everyone can do." The bakery did well. Better than well, actually. Within a few months, there were lines out the door on weekends. Food critics wrote glowing reviews. I was featured in local magazines and then national ones. Olivia's became known as the place to go for authentic, homemade, soul-warming pastries. I hired more staff. I expanded the menu. I started teaching baking classes on weekday evenings. Slowly, I built something I could be proud of. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Derek walked through the door. I almost did not recognize him. He had lost weight, and not in a healthy way. His clothes were simple, a plain jacket and worn jeans. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. He approached the counter where I was working. Our eyes met. "Olivia," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Can we talk?" I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron. "What do you want, Derek? I wanted to see you. To apologize." I studied his face, looking for the man I had once loved. I saw traces of him buried under layers of regret and exhaustion. "Okay," I said. "I have 5 minutes." We sat at a small table in the corner. Derek fidgeted with a napkin, unable to meet my eyes. "I was wrong," he said finally, "about everything. About you, about us, about what matters in life." I waited. When I had money, everyone wanted to be around me. When it was gone, they vanished. Every single one of them. My mother will barely speak to me. Preston has not returned my calls in months. And Natasha... He laughed bitterly. She was gone before the ink was dry on the bankruptcy papers. "I am sorry," I said, and I meant it. Truly, I am sorry that happened to you. He looked up, surprised by my sincerity. "You should hate me. After everything I did, I used to," I admitted, "for a while. But hate is exhausting, Derek. It takes more energy than I am willing to give. I have moved on. I can see that." He gestured around the bakery. "You built all this yourself, with help from people who believed in me, people who saw value in who I am not, who I could become for them." Derek winced at the implied rebuke. I know I tried to change you. I know I made you feel worthless, and I am sorrier than I can ever say." I appreciated his words, but they did not change anything. They could not undo the years of damage. "Derek," I said gently, "I have forgiven you. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. My life now, it does not have room for you in it, not in the way you might be hoping." He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping further. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that you were right. All along. You were the only real thing in my life, and I was too blind to see it." I reached across the table and briefly squeezed his hand. "I hope you find peace, Derek. I really do, but you will not find it with me." He stood up, and for a moment I thought he might argue, might try to convince me to give him another chance, but he just nodded again. "Goodbye, Olivia. Goodbye, Derek." He walked out of the bakery and out of my life. I watched him go without sadness, without anger, without regret, just a quiet acceptance that this chapter was finally completely closed. That evening, I stayed late at the bakery after everyone else had gone home. I stood in the kitchen surrounded by the tools of my trade and thought about everything that had led me here. 3 years ago, I had been a broken woman, convinced I was worthless because a man had told me so. I had lost myself trying to become someone else. I had believed that love meant erasing who I was, but I had been wrong. Love, real love, does not ask you to become smaller. It does not demand perfection or conformity. It accepts you as you are, flaws and all. Derek never loved the real me. He loved the idea of what I could become. When I failed to meet his expectations, he discarded me. But the failure was his, not mine. He could not see the value in what was right in front of him. I thought about my grandmother Ruth, who had built a beautiful life on her own terms. I thought about Margot, who had stood by me through the darkest moments. I thought about Theo, who had believed in my talent before I believed in it myself. I thought about every customer who walked into my bakery with a smile and left with something I had made with my own 2 hands. These were the people who mattered. These were the connections that had real worth. I pulled out a fresh batch of ingredients and started mixing dough. It was late, but I was not tired. I was at peace. The woman Derek had dismissed as unworthy had built something real, not a $1 million empire based on deals and appearances, but a modest bakery built on love, tradition, and hard work. It would never make me rich by his standards, but by the standards that actually mattered, I was wealthy beyond measure. If you are watching this, if you have ever been in a relationship where someone made you feel like you were not enough, I want you to know something. The problem was never you, it was them. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. You deserve to be loved for exactly who you are. And if someone cannot do that, they do not deserve a place in your life. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. And now I am passing that lesson on to you. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had someone in your life who made you feel unworthy? How did you find your way back to yourself? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Sharing this video might help someone else who needs to hear this message today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. I wish you all the strength to know your worth and the courage to walk away from anyone who cannot see it. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, you are always, always enough.